And then there was like this bit that didn't feel right to me, but it was primarily what I felt was off with what I now know as aqidah, right? What was off with the theological reality, and learned about the sort of deeper spiritual tradition of Rastafarianism. I had dreadlocks at the time. As a shepherd in Palestine, like I lived in a barn, I slept on a bale of hay, and I had sheep and goats, and I used to be out in the field. I played a flute and my work in psychology, that's the career that I have, is also how I embraced Islam. So my background is in psychology. I have a master's degree in psychology as well as a PhD. But before I did the PhD, I had an entire career just as a clinician. And leading up to that, what inspired me to become a therapist or a counseling psychologist is that I was always driven to understand the nature of humanity, the nature of human beings. Before college, I used to travel and I used to read a lot, mostly still within the US. I would sort of explore other communities, different cultural communities, and read on lots of different religious traditions. I started to study psychology, and the only classes that interested me were psychology and religion, and I took some classes on Buddhism, and so I spent some time in college where I was actually finding a teacher named Baba Haridas. So I lived in Thailand for a while, and I studied in the jungle with a Buddhist monk, and we would fish out of rivers and just live very simple life. I lived in Jamaica, in the hills of Jamaica, with a Rastafarian elder, and learned about the sort of deeper spiritual tradition of Rastafarianism. I had dreadlocks at the time. Some of these aspects come from Christianity, but they're understood in a way that is aligned with sort of the notion of human beings that isn't influenced by a colonialist narrative. As a shepherd in Palestine, like I lived in a barn, I slept on a bale of hay, and I had sheep and goats, and I used to be out in the field I played a flute, and just so I was really connecting with these ancient ways of being and sort of these lines of prophetic teachings and prophetic ways of being as well. And then there was like this bit that didn't feel right to me, but it was primarily what I felt was off with what I now know as aqidah, right? What was off with the theological reality. And the irony is that I didn't yet have that whole theological reality presented to me in a way that I could see it as, okay, this is it. I just was going based on my own sense. And the people who showed me Islam, or who I came in contact with, they were Muslims, they were practicing Muslims, they prayed 5 times a day, they did the religion of Islam. And yet they treated me as if, even though I wasn't Muslim and I wasn't praying, I wasn't doing all these things, they treated me as if I could potentially be on a higher level with them, and still have a close relationship with Allah, or potentially even a closer relationship with Allah. And so it all just clicked, and everything that I had collected from all these gems that I talked about collecting from all these different places, they were all there within Islam. And then to me it felt like that was just the beginning of the door had opened to this entire other depth that I hadn't even yet realized or discovered. And so it was very immediate and very clear that whole journey was my journey to Islam. And so I embraced Islam, and this simultaneously became my approach to psychology. My approach to understanding psychology was at that point completely informed by Islam.